uh, now the main topic today that we'll be discussing is 15th century as a barren age in literature. Why this age is regarded as a barren age in literature? So most of the critics they generally point this fact out that 15th century did not produce anything commendable or anything which was significant. The reasons behind, like W.H. Hudson, he calls it a long barren period because no talented poet was born during this period, and there is hardly any prose writer of any significance. Okay, you know the English Chaucerians, the Scottish Chaucerians, they tried uh, to continue the same spirit or same high style which Geoffrey Chaucer had set, but they failed to achieve those standards because of lack of originality, because of lack of depth, because of lack of a kind of freshness which Geoffrey Chaucer had brought to English poetry. So they just remain imitators on a superficial level. Okay, and they could not match the skill whether in characterization, narration, and versification. We discussed how Geoffrey Chaucer was the greatest of all in art of characterization, in the art of narration, and also how he experimented with versification, and he has given us some of the best verse styles like heroic couplet which he used for the first time in English. Then there is another Chaucerian stanza, or rhyme royal, and also he uses an octosyllabic couplet in some of his poetries. So he was a real innovator in every field. So this is already repeated. So there was a decay. Decay means something which naturally weakens over a period of time in quality as well as strength. कोई चीज जब समय के साथ जो कमजोर पड़ जाती है या उसमें वो उतनी ब्यूटी और वो नहीं रहती है तो उसको हम डिके कहते हैं। पतन होना, जिस तरह से पत्ते हैं हरे होते हैं फिर पीले पड़ते हैं फिर धीरे धीरे डिके होके दे फॉल डाउन. So similarly this kind of trend was seen in English literature also, and we already discussed how the works of these Chaucerians, John Lydgate, Skelton House, there is they lack that creative imagination which Geoffrey Chaucer actually possessed. Okay, in prose also their output is almost negligible. Uh, okay, uh, there are certain reasons why this age remains generally a kind of barren period for literary production. We will discuss some of them now. Why this happened? Okay, because as I told you since beginning, I have been telling you that literature is written by man, and man is the product of environment. Environment consists of everything around us, that is physical. गर्मी है, सर्दी है, ठीक है, पहाड़ है, मैदान है, रेगिस्तान है, वेयर वी लिव दैट अफेक्ट्स अस, आवर हैबिट्स, आवर स्टाइल, उसी से हमारी लैंग्वेज बनती है, कल्चर बनता है. सो एवरीथिंग अफेक्ट्स ह्यूमन बीइंग्स, एंड दैट रिफ्लेक्शन is seen in the literature. So let us discuss what are the reasons why this age remains a barren period in English literature. So first is the War of Roses, which I have already discussed with you. Okay, the War of Roses, which continued from 1455 to 1485. It was actually, as discussed earlier, a war, a kind of conflict between two houses of the same empire, the House of Lancaster and the House of Yorks. अब इसको गुलाबों की लड़ाई क्यों कहते हैं? तो इसलिए इसलिए नहीं कि वो गुलाब फेंक फेंक के एक दूसरे को मारते थे, इसलिए कि because their symbols, the flags, they were two different colored roses. One was red rose, another was white rose. So because of this war, what happened? Whenever there is a war, there is wastage of energy, because all your resources, all your attention is focused on the war, on those conflicts, right? conflicts, because a lot of energy, the positive energy, creative energy, which could have been used in other creative pursuits, goes waste in these conflicts. This is not exactly not a war. It was kind of conflicts which caused. There was unrest, chaos, and there was lawlessness all around, because the entire, monarchy is, fixed on resolving these conflicts. So the records of this writing, uh, which shows that there was complete disorder which prevailed during this period, and the war, these kind of conflicts, they also bring some kind of, uh, uh, you know, uh, financial constraints, that because you have to, once you go to war, so you have to, cater to so many things. You need weapons, you need to pay to those soldiers who are actually fighting, and also the cost, gets transferred to the public now in form of taxes. So that is why even the exchequer was empty, and even those people who were fighting continuously, they were exhausted, that they didn't have, they were not left with any spirits now. Okay. And during those times, these literary men, they required patronage. Patronage means there must be someone who pays for their writings, right? It's not like in today's world you can publish a book, you can get publishers. But again, here in today's world also, you have to find some funding agency. So वो funding agency, जैसे मान लो you want to produce a novel, and so you need funding, because you cannot fund lakhs of rupees all of a sudden. So during those times also, today you may have some agencies which may come to help you, but in during those times we only had what we only had uh, these rich people who could, assist, or who could help uh, these literary men. उनको भी घर चलाना होता था, नहीं उनको भी पैसा चाहिए, तो who supported them, उनको भी support के लिए कोई ना कोई patronization चाहिए. Patron means those people who supported them financially, right? तो उस तरह के लोग मिल नहीं रहे थे, because the entire focus was on the this conflict, the war of roses. और जो रिच लोग थे, वो लोग दे डिड नॉट केयर मच फॉर लिटरेचर. उनके लिए लिटरेचर बेकार जैसी चीज है, उस पर पैसा खर्चा क्यों करना. इस तरह की सोच थी उनकी. जो नए 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 जो धनी लोग बने थे, न्यो न्यो रिच. ओके. सो there was no inspiration for the writers, because unless you have an inspiration, you cannot produce something big and great. Second thing was political and religious changes. This period between 1400 to 1550, it was a period of vast political and religious changes. Okay, the old order was changing. In the words of this um, that Victorian poet, the old order changeth, yielding place to the new. Uh, I think Robert Browning or Tennyson, I think Tennyson. So the introduction of the printing press and establishment of universities, that was something which was happening new in the world now. There was new things were being established. So this is very important for you to note down, that the first printing press was established in England in 1476 by William Caxton. Okay, you must note this down, because this may be asked in your competitive exams. So, for the first time, printing press was brought to London by William Caxton in 1476, and also there were universities of Oxford, Cambridge. They were established, and now some new ideas were also coming. New ideas in the form of Renaissance, that is Greek ideas, they also were having their impact. Okay. And this caused a kind of hindrance to literary production, but these changes disturbed the peace and stability which was essential for any literary and artistic एक्टिविटी. ओके, तो ये सारी चीजें जो थी, political religious changes, that war of roses, because of which there was no political stability, uh, there was not a congenial environment, there were no patterns for, there was no inspiration for the writers or the poets. So as a result, what happened, in such an environment of chaos, in such an environment of instability, there was uh, there was no significant literary activity. Okay, so these changes, you have to remember, these were political and historical reasons. Now, let us understand other technical reasons also, like there was lack of poetic understanding. Okay, now you know that Geoffrey Chaucer was the master, and he was a genius in terms of creativity, in terms of creative imagination. So, Chaucer's followers, they lacked understanding of the poetic skill. They could not equal, even they could not come somewhere near to the mastery or the skill of this great master whom you know as Geoffrey Chaucer. And we have already discussed at length how they tried to imitate the style, theme, and the spirit of Geoffrey Chaucer, but they failed in this attempt very badly because of lack of originality, because of lack of those great qualities of art of characterization, narration, and versification. And moreover, uh, there were a lot of inflections in the old English. Inflection jab when you will read this, the structure of English language, maybe in your second semester or third, so then you will come to know what an inflection mean. Inflections means a lot of vowels which were introduced unnecessarily, okay, in old English. So that is why old English is very difficult, if you want to read it today. In the modern English, it has got uh, very less inflections, and it is, words are fixed now. So but in old English there are a lot of inflections. uh, Inflection is something like, हिंदी में समझते हो, जैसे रहा, रही, रहा है, रही है, रहे हैं, रहे, रहा, रहा को हम रहे को कितनी बार रहा, रही, रहे, इस तरह से। ओके, और अननेसेसरी इन्फ्लेक्शंस थी ओल्ड इंग्लिश में। सो इसकी वजह से उसको प्रॉपर यूज करना मुश्किल हो रहा था उनके लिए। देयर वाज नो इंग्लिश पोएट हु कुड मॉडिफाई द ओल्ड मीटर टू सूट द चेंजेस। Okay, because of lack of that creative imagination and lack of originality and depth, these English Chaucerians, or the Chaucerians who followed Geoffrey Chaucer, they could not, dare to make those changes which Geoffrey Chaucer daringly did. Okay, so the English was form was, all of a sudden it had lost its balance. But later on, this balance was recovered by Edmund Spencer. We'll be discussing in Elizabethan age. So this is another reason. First reason was political instability because of War of Roses. Second is that chaos and confusion which was there prevailing in English society, and in the absence of any positive environment or what you call that, right inspiration, uh, the poets, they could not find any right kind of inspiration. And the next point is there was no free moment of thought. So another important factor which resulted in barrenness in literary production was lack of free moment of thought. Once you want to produce something, beautiful, lovely, or creative, then the writers or the poets need to think freely, openly, and creatively. Then only your imagination, your creativity will, produce its best. So this was not the best of the times for free moment of thought. There were a lot of conflicts going on within the society. John Wycliffe, he was trying to reform those religious reforms that which we talked about. How people, they were fed up. They were, there was a growing resentment amongst a large portion of the population regarding the degradation, moral degradation, and corruption in the affairs of the church. Why? Because of that severe, very severe or strict rules of Roman Catholic Church. So these people, Wycliffe and his followers, the Lollards, they wanted to bring reforms in terms of the church's affairs. They wanted to, secularize it. They wanted to make it more secular and liberal. Okay, so these uh, all these things, religious values continue to degenerate, and all attempts to reform and free expression was stifled by those in power and authority. And there are a lot of persecutions as well. Those who wanted reforms, they were their voice was uh, oppressed or suppressed. And then in now literature cannot survive in such an environment of oppression and suppression, because literature means a free movement of thoughts and expression, but the times or the environment was not congenial for such free movement of thoughts and expression. So this is another reason why this age is generally regarded as a barren age in English literature. And there was poor state of education. uh, Universities, they had just come up, and they were not, in fact, they had not yet become the centers of intellectual activity. A lot of energy was wasted on useless controversies, right? Based on those medieval philosophy. And the spirit also was not highly creative. It was some kind of old and dying spirit which prevailed amongst those people, the fast rising middle class. So it was not congenial for intellectual interests of any kind. So you can understand that uh, there was, first thing is, there was no free movement of thought, uh, because reforms were scoffed at, reforms were oppressed or suppressed, and moreover, there was a poor state of education. Even the intellectual debate that lacked the freshness, that lacked the originality, that lacked that intellectual depth. Okay, so these were the reasons. And last point that we'll discuss is no source of inspiration for literary genius. Now, in the previous age, we have a great literary genius called by the name Geoffrey Chaucer, but in the 15th century, there was hardly any source of inspiration for literary genius, and that is why this age remains barren in terms of producing any significant literature. There was no talented poet, and uh, a kind of intellectual barrenness was seen. And the poets of this age, they are quite inferior in technique. We have discussed it 100 times now, I think. And uh, contact with the continent, once so fruitful, could not revive the flagging literary impulse. That means English empire was not growing. They were finding new places, and they were finding new contexts, but still it failed to revive that spirit in English literature. And now, because of lack of any what do you call that, great literary genius, there was no writer who could carry on the Chaucerian tradition uh, with great originality and depth. And but as I discussed earlier also, when we discussed how the drama began, the 15th century was the time when seeds were sown for germination of literature of highest order. That you will see in the Elizabethan age, how the small beginnings, like those mystery, miracle, and morality plays, and moreover this popularity, growing popularity of drama, and those cycles, which cycle of plays which popularize this genre. And that is what this age did. It sowed the seeds which germinated to produce the literature of highest order in the next, that is the Elizabethan age. And certain things which were good, which happened during this age, were like introduction of printing press, which led to the publication of books. So you have a large number of reading public, and this is the manner in which you can propagate your ideas or literature. And Greek ideas and culture also became popular. So in terms of religion, reformation was brought about. uh, Reformation brought various changes in the religious fields. And finally, I would like to leave you with these words from a critic. In previous years, chivalry and old feudal system had practically been banished. Now, monasticism, the third medieval institution with its mixed evil and good, received the death blow in the suppression of monasteries and the removal of abbots from the House of Lords. Okay. So, political stability, broad national outlook, and modern secular spirit were achieved towards the close of 15th century. So now, after the storm, it is time for the tranquil, it is time for the peace, and that peace has arrived now towards the end of this 15th century. The political instability becomes just the opposite. There is political stability, there is a broad nationalistic sentiment, and the outlook also improves. And the secular spirit, modern secular spirit, that is achieved towards the close of 15th century. And this is what is good for everything, including literature. And the stage is now set for the Elizabethans to come and take English literature to the next higher level. So this is how you can summarize this entire age. And there may be questions asked to you in your final exam.